The Philadelphia Convention by Harrison Clark, Margaret Dodson, Thomas Graham, Hughes Mitchell, and Lucy Smith. The Philadelphia Convention was hosted in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
The main catalyst for the Philadelphia Convention were the faults in the Articles of Confederation. After being fed up with the inability of the federal government to provide Pennsylvania support throughout Shays' Rebellion, the states realized the need for a strong federal government.
Congress called for the Philadelphia Convention in order to revise the governing document to be more effective for the new United Nation. 55 delegates with representatives elected from each of the 13 states, except Rhode Island, gathered at the convention in Philadelphia in May of 1787.
3/4 of the delegates served in Congress, and some played important parts in the Revolution. Thomas Jefferson wrote about the convention that it was a representative body that was an assembly of demigods. Many delegates had served in the Continental Congress, so they had brought with them some experience regarding government issues. Half of the delegates had served as officers in the Continental Army.
Following his paramount role in winning the Revolutionary War for the colonies, George Washington, being one of the most respected and honored people in the new nation, retired and planned to quietly live out his life on his Mount Vernon plantation. Washington politely declined the first invitations to the convention, as he did not wish to hold political office. At last, Washington accepted the invite, looking to calm the restless people and prove that he had not lost faith in his government.
James Madison had one of the largest impacts in the writing of the Constitution, despite being one of the youngest men present at the Philadelphia Convention. He brought the Virginia plan with him to the Philadelphia Convention and introduced it to the 54 other men that were there. The Virginia plan was a blueprint that proposed the creation of a new national government because he strongly supported a strong federal government that would unify the country.
James Wilson, although one of the lesser-known delegates, influenced the Constitution in many ways. Prior to the Pennsylvania Convention, he had served 2 terms on the Continental Congress. He also led the Federalist forces in Pennsylvania, and later he went on to be appointed a Supreme Court Justice by President George Washington.
Elbridge Gerry was one of the most vocal delegates in opposing the Constitution. In Massachusetts, he led the forces against ratification of the Constitution. And at the Philadelphia Convention, he refused to sign the document because it did not suggest a Bill of Rights for the people.
Roger Sherman attended the convention as a delegate from Connecticut. The main contribution that he made was that he brought the Connecticut Compromise on representation to Congress. The Connecticut Compromise was an agreement that large and small states reached during the Constitutional Convention of 1787 that in part defined the legislative structure and representation that each state would have under the United States government.
At the time of the convention, Edmund Randolph was the governor of Virginia. Randolph took the responsibility of presenting James Madison's Virginia plan to the convention. Randolph sat through the majority of the remaining debates, but had to leave the convention early for business reasons. He later wrote in his Letters of a Landholder that he would have gladly ratified the final document.
Benjamin Franklin was a wise and respected man throughout his lifetime and was one of the most important people in forming the Constitution. Aside from politics, he was also involved in science and was an inventor. At the time of the Philadelphia Convention, he was 81 years old and in poor health, but this did not stop him from holding a very important role in the convention. He possessed a strong moral reputation that many of the men looked up to. His presence left an atmosphere of wisdom in the Philadelphia Convention because of the reputation that he held.
Following the adjournment of the convention, Alexander Hamilton worked with James Madison and John Jay to write a defense for the newly written Constitution. They wrote more than 80 articles for various newspapers in an effort to convince the general population to support delegates in favor of the ratification of the Constitution. These articles were later combined into the book The Federalist.